The rescue ships appeared on Kepler 442c's horizon 14 days after the crash, their sleek hulls cutting through the morning mist like silver knives. Commander Yel Shah of the coalition rescue vessel Redemption had expected to find survivors, huddled in emergency shelters, rationing their last supplies while awaiting extraction. What she discovered instead challenged every assumption she held about survival protocols and species capabilities. The crash site of the Stellar Harmony had been transformed into something resembling a thriving settlement. Multiple interconnected structures dotted the clearing, each one built from organic materials but displaying engineering sophistication that made the Altarian commander pause in confusion. Smoke rose from carefully constructed fire pits, water flowed through an elaborate collection and purification system, and what appeared to be a functional workshop occupied one corner of the settlement. "Are you certain this is the correct location?" she asked her navigator, studying the scene through her ship's sensors. "The beacon signature matches, but these readings suggest an established colony, not crash survivors." "Confirmed, Commander," the navigator replied, his own voice tinged with bewilderment. "This is definitely the Stellar Harmony's last known position, but I'm detecting multiple life signs, all in excellent health, and what appears to be agricultural activity." The rescue team's landing craft touched down near the wreckage of the survey vessel, and Commander Yelshaw emerged with her medical team, expecting to treat traumatized survivors. Instead, she was greeted by Captain Veltar, who looked healthier than he had in his official personnel files. His scales showed the vibrant coloration of a well-fed saurian, and his movements were confident and energetic. "Commander Yelshaw," Veltar said, offering the traditional saurian salute. "Welcome to our temporary home. I trust your journey was comfortable." The rescue commander found herself at a loss for words. Standard protocol dictated that crash survivors should be immediately evacuated for medical treatment and psychological evaluation. The beings before her showed no signs of trauma, malnutrition, or the technological withdrawal symptoms common to stranded crews. "Captain Veltar, we're here to extract you and your crew," she managed. "Medical teams are standing by to treat any injuries or environmental exposure effects." "That's very kind," Veltar replied with what might have been amusement. "But as you can see, we're quite well. Perhaps you'd like a tour of our settlement before we discuss extraction procedures?" Engineer Kicksmile emerged from what appeared to be a workshop constructed entirely from woven branches and leaves. His injured arm had healed completely, and he carried what looked like a sophisticated cutting tool crafted from shaped stone and carved wood. "Commander," he chittered in greeting, "your timing is excellent. We've just completed our water purification upgrade, and I was hoping to demonstrate the filtration efficiency to someone with technical background." Behind him, So-Jin appeared carrying a basket woven from plant fibers, filled with what the rescue team's scanners identified as nutritious local vegetation. Her appearance was the most shocking of all. Rather than the pale, malnourished look of a crash survivor, she radiated health and vitality. Her skin was tanned from outdoor work, her muscles toned from physical labor, and her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "You have to see what we've accomplished here," she said to the stunned rescue team. "The biodiversity on this planet is incredible, and the applications for natural resource utilization are going to revolutionize our understanding of sustainable living." Navigator Bluven's voice emerged from a sophisticated aquatic habitat that put some permanent installations to shame. The structure channeled natural water flow to maintain perfect conditions for his species, while integrating seamlessly with the settlement's overall design. "The hydrodynamic engineering principles we've developed here," his translated voice bubbled with excitement, "could be applied to aquatic colonies throughout the galaxy. We've created a closed-loop system that requires no external power source, yet maintains optimal environmental parameters." Commander Yelshaw found herself being led through a settlement that challenged everything she thought she knew about survival technology. Every structure served multiple purposes, every system integrated with every other system, and all of it had been accomplished using nothing but organic materials and ingenuity. "This is impossible," she murmured to her medical officer. "Preliminary. Scans showed this planet as marginally habitable. How did they not only survive but thrive?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Daeho emerged from the forest carrying an armload of materials, his movements efficient and purposeful. Unlike his crewmates, he showed clear signs of hard physical labor, calloused hands, sun-weathered skin, and the lean build of someone who had been living off the land. But like the others, he radiated contentment and health. "You must be the rescue team," he said with a welcoming smile. "I'm Daeho Kim, survival specialist, though I suppose that title has taken on new meaning over the past 2 weeks." "Mr. Kim," Commander Yelshaw said carefully, "our preliminary reports suggested this planet presented significant survival challenges. How did you manage to not only survive but establish what appears to be a permanent settlement?" Daeho set down his materials, branches selected for specific properties, stones shaped for particular purposes, plant fibers prepared for construction. "The planet isn't hostile," he explained. "It just requires different approaches than our technology typically provides. When our equipment failed, we had to adapt." Captain Veltar stepped forward, his demeanor carrying new authority and confidence. "Commander, I need to make an official request. I want this entire operation documented and submitted to the Coalition Emergency Protocols Committee. What we've learned here could save countless lives." "I don't understand," the rescue commander replied. Engineer Kicksmall's antennae twitched with enthusiasm. "Our technological solutions failed because they weren't designed for these specific conditions, but Daeho's methods," he gestured at the settlement around them, "these work regardless of power sources, equipment failures, or environmental variables." Sojin had been taking notes throughout the rescue team's visit, documenting their reactions and questions. "We want to propose a new training protocol," she said. "Every coalition crew should learn these techniques, not as backup procedures, but as primary survival skills." The implications were staggering. Commander Yelshaw looked around the settlement again, seeing it with new eyes. What she had initially dismissed as primitive construction was actually sophisticated engineering, adapted to local conditions. The beings she had come to rescue were proposing to revolutionize coalition survival protocols based on techniques that predated spaceflight. "This will require extensive review," she said slowly. "The Coalition Council will need to evaluate." "Already documented," Captain Veltar interrupted, producing a detailed report written on material made from processed plant fibers. 14 days of comprehensive data on construction techniques, resource utilization, multi-species environmental adaptation, and psychological effects of technology-independent survival. Navigator Bluvin's aquatic habitat bubbled as he added, "We've also identified 17 different applications for these techniques in existing coalition operations. Emergency protocols, long-term exploration missions, colony establishment procedures, all could benefit from integration of human adaptive methods." 3 months later, on the Coalition training station orbiting Rigel 7, Daeho stood before a class of 43 cadets representing 12 different species. Rain pelted the training ground outside, artificially generated but chemically, identical to the conditions on Kepler 442c. "Your emergency shelters have all failed," he announced to the group of young officers huddled in their disabled evacuation pods. "Your communication equipment is offline, your power sources are depleted, and rescue won't arrive for at least 10 days. What do?" A Vespid cadet raised her appendage tentatively. "Instructor Kim, shouldn't we attempt to repair our technological systems first?" "That's exactly the kind of thinking that gets crews killed," Daeho replied, not unkindly. "Technology is a tool, not a crutch. When your tools break, you need to know how to work without them." He gestured toward the forest surrounding their training area. "Everything you need to survive comfortably is out there. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize it and skilled enough to use it." As the cadets reluctantly abandoned their disabled shelters and began to explore their environment, Daeho felt a familiar satisfaction. Captain Veltar's report had indeed revolutionized coalition protocols. Emergency survival training now included extensive education in what the official documents called human adaptive techniques, though Daeho preferred to think of them simply as common sense. The training programs had spread throughout coalition space, and preliminary reports showed a 97% improvement in survival rates for crews stranded in challenging environments. More importantly, the psychological profiles of graduates showed increased confidence, adaptability, and resourcefulness across all species. A young Saurian cadet approached hesitantly. "Instructor Kim, I've found some suitable branches, but I'm uncertain about the structural eng." The proximity alarms aboard the Harmony began their urgent wailing at 0347 hours ship time. Captain Lee Tae-ho was in his quarters, reviewing Dr. So-young's latest reports on Keth neural rehabilitation when the klaxons dragged him from his contemplation. He was on the bridge in under 90 seconds, but Communications Officer Kim Dong-woo was already pale with dread. "Captain, we have incoming contacts. Multiple signatures bearing 187 Mark 12. They're massive, sir." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that would have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying. A Keth war fleet hung in space like a constellation of death. 17 vessels ranging from destroyer-class raiders to the massive dreadnought that dominated the formation like a predatory leviathan. Each ship was a work of aggressive art, all sharp angles and weapon ports, designed to strike fear into enemies before the first shot was fired. "Distance?" Tae-ho asked, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his veins. 2 million kilometers. "And closing," Navigator Yoon Kyung-ho reported. "They'll be in weapons range in 17 minutes. Aboard the lead dreadnought Bone Crusher, Warlord Grix stood on his command deck like a monument to violence made flesh. Even among the Keth, he was exceptional. 9 feet of scarred muscle and natural armor, with cybernetic enhancements that glowed with malevolent energy. His left arm had been replaced with a weapon system after a battle with the crystal beings of Zerion Prime, and his right eye was a targeting computer that had guided the death of 10,000 enemies. "Status of the corrupted ones?" he growled. To his communications officer, "The blood render remains functional, my warlord. Vex and Thok are aboard, along with alien contamination." Grix's remaining organic eye blazed with fury. He had trained Vex personally, had watched him rise through the ranks to become one of their most effective battlefield commanders. To see such a perfect weapon corrupted by alien influence was an affront that demanded blood-soaked resolution. "Open communication to the alien vessel," he commanded. On the Harmony's bridge, Dong-woo's hands flew over his controls as the incoming transmission resolved into harsh, predatory syllables that the translation matrix struggled to process. "Alien vessel, I am Warlord Grix of the Keth Dominion. You have contaminated warriors of the Eternal War with your weakness. Surrender the corrupted ones immediately, and your death will be swift." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of life support and the distant sound of weapons charging throughout the ship. Cultural attaché Choi Min-jung spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, our shields won't last 30 seconds against that fleet." Tae-ho stared at the tactical display showing the approaching armada. Every instinct, every piece of military training, every survival protocol screamed at him to run. The Harmony was a diplomatic vessel, lightly armed and designed for exploration, not combat. Against a Keth war fleet, they were a minnow facing a school of sharks, but running would mean abandoning Vex and Thok, and everything his species stood for rebelled against that choice. "Dong-woo, open a channel to the Keth flagship," he ordered. "Sir?" Kyung-ho's voice carried disbelief. "I'm going to talk to him." The communication established with a harsh electronic screech. On the view screen, Warlord Grix's scarred visage appeared, his cybernetic eye glowing with targeting algorithms as it analyzed their bridge. "I am Captain Lee Tae-ho of the human vessel Harmony," Tae-ho began, his voice carrying calm authority, despite the impossible odds. "I propose a meeting. You, me, and your warriors. Aboard my ship." The translation caused a moment of stunned silence from the Keth fleet. Grix's organic eye narrowed as he processed the alien's words. "You invite me aboard your vessel?" The concept was so foreign to Keth thinking that the translation matrix struggled with it. "I do. We have things to discuss that require face-to-face communication." What Tae-ho was proposing violated every principle of Keth warfare. Enemies did not meet for discussion. There was no communication except the language of violence. Yet, something about the aliens' complete lack of fear intrigued Grix in a way that he found deeply disturbing. "You would place yourself within striking distance of a Keth warlord?" Grix asked. "I would place myself within speaking distance of someone I hope to understand," Tejo replied. An hour later, the Harmony's docking bay had been cleared of all non-essential personnel. Tejo stood with his senior staff as the shuttle from the Bone Crusher settled onto the deck with predatory grace. The airlock cycled, and Warlord Grix emerged like a walking nightmare. Up close, the Keth warlord was even more intimidating. Battle scars crisscrossed his natural armor, each one a story of violence survived and enemies destroyed. His cybernetic enhancements hummed with barely contained energy, and his presence filled the docking bay with an almost physical sense of menace. Behind him came Vex and Thok, their postures showing the confusion that had been growing within them over the past days. Vex's wounds had healed under Dr. So-Young's care, but something fundamental had changed in his bearing. Where once he had moved with predatory certainty, now he carried himself with hesitation, as if questioning every step. "You are the one who has poisoned my warriors," Grix stated, his voice like grinding stone. "I am the one who has shown them kindness," Tejo replied evenly. The word kindness emerged from the translation system as a harsh approximation that made Grix's cybernetic eye flare with targeting light. The concept was so foreign to Keth, understanding that it registered as a potential threat. Dr. So-Young stepped forward, her medical scanner in hand. "Warlord Grix, I've been studying your species' neural patterns. What was done to you, to all of you, by your creators, it was wrong. You were not meant to live as weapons. You were meant to be people." "People?" Grix snarled, the translated word carrying overtones of weakness and contempt. "We are Keth. We are war incarnate. We know no purpose but victory, no satisfaction but conquest." But even as he spoke, his organic eye was studying the humans around him. These soft, small creatures showed no fear in his presence, no submission to his obvious dominance. Instead, they looked at him with something he couldn't identify, something that made his cybernetic targeting systems misfire with confusion. It was Vex who spoke next, his voice carrying new overtones that made Grix's blood run cold. "Warlord," Vex said carefully, "these beings, they are not prey." The words hit the docking bay like a physical blow. For a Keth warrior to declare that potential enemies were not prey was tantamount to heresy. Grix's weapon arm began cycling up to firing position. "You dare speak such corruption in my presence?" he roared. But Vex stood his ground, something that would have been impossible just days before. "They saved my life when they could have let me die. They repaired our ship when they could have claimed it as salvage. They offered friendship when we offered only death. How is this the behavior of prey?" Thok stepped forward to stand beside his battle brother, his massive frame radiating newfound conviction. "The small one showed me images of his offspring," he said, his voice carrying wonder. "He fights not to destroy, but to create. He wages war against chaos itself, seeking to build something better for those who come after." Is this not the ultimate victory? Grix felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare, genuine uncertainty. The corruption had spread deeper than he had imagined. These warriors, who should have been perfect instruments of violence, were speaking of concepts that had no place in Keth existence. "Then you choose to stand with the aliens against your own kind?" Grix demanded. "We choose to stand with those who offer hope over those who offer only death," Vex replied. The challenge was issued in the most traditional Keth manner possible. Grix's claws extended to their full length, and he dropped into a combat stance that spoke of countless victories and rivers of enemy blood. "Then prove your conviction," he snarled. "Face me in combat for the right to poison minds with your alien weakness." Vex accepted the challenge without hesitation. But what happened next defied every principle of Keth warfare. The two warriors circled each other in the cleared space of the docking bay, their movements flowing with lethal grace. When they struck, it was with the fury of natural disasters, claws ringing against natural armor, both warriors drawing blood within seconds. But as the fight progressed, something extraordinary occurred. Vex, despite his superior skill and the righteous fury of his conviction, began to gain the upper hand not through superior violence, but through superior purpose. Every blow he struck was calculated not to destroy, but to disable. Every defensive move was designed not to humiliate his opponent, but to minimize harm. When Grix finally fell, wounded but alive, Vex stood over him with claws that could have ended the warlord's life in an instant. Instead, he extended his hand, not to deliver a killing blow, but to help his former commander to his feet. "The humans taught me something the Vorth never did," Vex said quietly. "True strength is not the power to destroy, but the power to choose mercy when destruction would be easier." The first indication that their impossible contact had attracted galactic attention came as Captain Lee Tae-ho was reviewing medical reports in his ready room. The communication array erupted in a cascade of incoming signals, not the usual background, chatter of deep space but urgent high-priority transmissions from across known space. "Captain, to the bridge," came Dongwu's tense voice over the intercom. "We're receiving priority communications from the Galactic Concordance, multiple species, sir. They all want to talk to you immediately." Tae-ho set down Dr. So-young's preliminary report on Keth physiology and made his way to the bridge, where organized chaos greeted him. Every communication station was active, alien languages flowing through the universal translators in an overlapping symphony of alarm and disbelief. "Report," he commanded. Dongwu's face was pale as he gestured to his screens. "Sir, somehow word has spread about our contact with the Keth. I'm receiving demands for immediate status reports from 17 different species. The Ethereals, the Crystalline Hegemony, the Aquatic Federation. Everyone in the Concordance wants to know what we've done." Before Tae-ho could respond, the main view screen activated, revealing the hauntingly beautiful features of Ambassador Zelthanis of the Ethereal Collective. Her species' trademark luminescent skin pulsed with agitation, and her large, dark eyes held an expression of barely controlled terror. "Captain Tae-ho," her mental voice resonated directly in their minds, bypassing the need for vocal translation. "Please tell me the reports we're receiving are some form of elaborate fabrication. Please tell me your species has not made contact with the Endless War." "The Endless War?" Tae-ho asked, though something cold was already forming in his stomach. "The Keth." Zelthanis' mental voice carried harmonics of ancient fear. "Captain, your species is new to this galaxy. You don't understand what you've encountered. The Keth are not merely aggressive. They are the incarnation of violence itself. They have ravaged 17 star systems in the past century alone. They know no mercy, except no surrender, and have never, in 800 years of recorded contact, shown any behavior that could be interpreted as anything other than predatory aggression." On the bridge, Cultural Attaché Choi Min-jung looked up from her analysis station. "Captain, I'm receiving similar warnings from the Hegemony archives. According to their records, the Keth have destroyed entire civilizations. The Mortai species was completely extinct within 6 months of first Keth contact. The beautiful crystal gardens of Velthar Prime, 1,000 years of artistic achievement, reduced to rubble in 3 days." The weight of what they had done began to settle on the bridge crew. They hadn't just made contact with an unknown species. They had extended friendship to what the galaxy considered an existential threat. "Captain," Zelthanis continued, her mental voice growing more urgent, "I implore you to understand. The Concordance has standing orders regarding Keth contact. There can be no negotiation, no diplomacy, no attempt at peaceful resolution. They must be destroyed immediately, before they can report your location to their war fleets. You're asking me to commit murder." Tae-ho replied quietly. "I'm asking you to prevent genocide," the ethereal ambassador shot back. "Every moment you delay, every second you allow those creatures to remain functional, you risk not just your own species but every peaceful civilization in this galaxy. The Keth don't just kill, Captain, they corrupt. They turn victory into an art form of suffering." Meanwhile, aboard the Keith ship, Vex was experiencing sensations that had no place in his species' existence. As his strength returned under Dr. So-Young's care, he found himself asking questions that should have been impossible for a Keth warrior to formulate. "The small ones," he said to Thok, gesturing toward where human engineer Kyung-ho was working on their environmental systems. "They risk death for enemies." "Why?" Thok, equally confused by recent events, could only offer the Keth equivalent of a shrug. "Programming error," he suggested, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Vex's confusion deepened as he watched So-Young work. She moved with careful precision, her face showing concentration in something else, something he was beginning to recognize as concern, not tactical assessment of his value as a warrior, not calculation of potential threat levels, but genuine worry for his well-being as an individual. "Dr. So-Young," he said, the human name feeling strange in his throat. "Your species, what is purpose?" So-Young looked up from her medical scanner, considering the question. Through the improving translation matrix, she understood he was asking something fundamental about human nature, human goals, human reason for existence. "We explore," she said simply. "We learn. We try to make things better than we found them. We help others when we can." Each translated concept hit Vex's consciousness like a revelation. Purpose beyond warfare, goals beyond dominance. The idea that a species could exist simply to improve conditions for others, including strangers, including enemies, was so foreign to his programming that it created actual physical discomfort. Dr. So-Young made a breakthrough that would change everything. While analyzing cellular samples from Vex's medical treatment, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The Keth neural structure showed clear signs of artificial modification, not evolution, but deliberate, sophisticated engineering. "Captain," she reported through the communication system, "I need you to see this immediately. The Keth, they weren't born this way." In her makeshift laboratory aboard the Keth ship, So-Young displayed her findings on a portable holoprojector. Brain scans showed neural pathways that had been surgically altered, genetic markers that indicated deliberate modification, and most disturbing of all, evidence of suppressed neural networks that should have governed social bonding and emotional development. "Someone did this to them," she said, her voice thick with horror and sympathy. "The Keth weren't naturally evolved predators. They were made into weapons. Look at these patterns. There are entire sections of their brains that have been artificially suppressed. The areas that govern empathy, social bonding, even basic curiosity about non-threatening stimuli. It's the most sophisticated psychological torture I've ever seen." Min Jung, who had been studying Keth historical records, felt pieces of a terrible puzzle falling into place. "The Vorth Empire," she said quietly. "I found references in their ship's database. The Keth were created by something called the Vorth Empire as biological weapons. The Vorth disappeared 8 centuries ago, but they left their living weapons behind. The implications were staggering. The Keth weren't evil. They were victims. An entire species had been psychologically mutilated, turned into living instruments of war, and then abandoned to spread violence throughout the galaxy for 800 years. On the bridge of the Harmony, the weight of this discovery settled over the crew like a shroud. They weren't just dealing with aggressive aliens, they were looking at the survivors of the most comprehensive psychological warfare campaign in galactic history. "We have to tell the Concordance," Min Jung said. "They need to know the truth." But when they attempted to share their findings, the response was swift and uncompromising. Ambassador Zelthanis's mental voice carried the cold finality of absolute conviction. "The origin of their condition is irrelevant, Captain. 800 years of violence cannot be undone by medical theories. The Keth have chosen their path, through action, regardless of how that path began. They must be stopped." "But if we could reverse the conditioning," Taeho began. "Impossible," interrupted a new voice, as representatives from the crystalline hegemony joined the communication. "The Keth have had 8 centuries to develop beyond their original programming. They are what they are by choice now, not by design." Communications Officer Dongwu was monitoring other channels when he detected something that changed everything. Thok, working alongside Engineer Kyung-ho, had done something unprecedented in Keth history. He had asked about Kyung-ho's family. The question came hesitantly, through the translation matrix. Small ones you protect, offspring? Kyung-ho had pulled out his personal tablet, showing pictures of his wife and young daughter back on Earth. Yes, this is my family. My wife Min-ae, and my daughter Hye-jin. She's 5 years old. Thok stared at the images for a long time, his massive claws surprisingly gentle as he held the small device. You fight for them? Every day, Kyung-ho replied. Not with weapons, but by building things, by making the universe safer for her to grow up in. Everything I do so she can have a better life than I had. The concept of fighting to create rather than destroy, of warfare aimed at building rather than conquering, was so revolutionary to Thok's understanding that it created a cascade failure in his neural programming. For the first time since his conditioning was completed, Thok experienced what could only be described as wonder. What is family? He asked, and the question carried a longing that surprised everyone who heard it. The docking tube sealed with a pneumatic hiss that echoed through the Harmony's corridors like a death knell. Dr. Park So-young adjusted her medical kit one final time, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Beside her, medical technicians Han Jae-min and Jung Eun-ji checked their emergency equipment with the practiced efficiency of professionals who had trained for every possible scenario except this one. Atmospheric analysis complete, reported Eun-ji, her voice tight with concentration. The air is breathable, but heavily contaminated with what appears to be blood. A lot of it. So-young nodded grimly. Remember, we have no idea what we're walking into. These beings were trying to kill us minutes ago. Stay alert, but remember, we're here to help. The airlock door slid open with a grinding sound that spoke of damaged mechanisms and failing power. The first thing that hit them was the smell, metallic, acrid, like copper pennies mixed with ozone and something else, something alien and organic, that made their primitive hindbrain scream warnings. The corridor beyond was a study in predatory architecture. Everything was designed with harsh angles and aggressive lines, as if the ship itself had been built to intimidate. Emergency lighting cast deep shadows that seemed to move with malevolent purpose. Jesus, whispered Jaemin, his eyes taking in the claw marks gouged into the metal walls. What kind of creatures live like this? Their answer came as they rounded the first corner. Thok stood in the center of the main corridor, his massive frame blocking their path like a living wall. 8 feet of corded muscle covered in natural armor plating, with claws that could rend steel and eyes that burned with predatory intelligence. Every instinct evolved over millions of years of human survival screamed at them to run. Instead, So-young stepped forward and slowly raised her medical scanner. "Can you understand me?" she asked, her voice calm despite the terror coursing through her veins. Thok tilted his massive head, confusion flickering across features designed only for intimidation. The translation algorithms from the Harmony were broadcasting through his ship's communication system, turning her words into approximations of Keth battle speech. But the concepts she was expressing, concern, offer of aid, peaceful intent, had no direct translations in his language. Behind Thok, a sound that was half growl, half moan echoed from deeper in the ship. So-young's medical training overrode her fear as she recognized the sound of someone in severe pain. "Your companion," she said, pointing past Thok toward the source of the sound. "He's hurt. I can help." The word help emerged from the ship's speakers as a harsh approximation that roughly translated to assist in battle preparation. Thok's confusion deepened. These small, soft creatures wanted to help prepare Vex for combat. But Vex was dying, his life fluid pooling on the command deck, his warrior's body finally succumbing to wounds that would have killed any other species hours ago. So-young took another step forward, and Thok's claws extended automatically, centuries of programming, asserting themselves. But something stopped him from striking. Perhaps it was the complete absence of fear in her eyes, or the way she held her medical equipment like offerings rather than weapons. For the first time in his existence, Thok experienced cognitive dissonance so severe it actually caused him physical pain. "Please," So-young said simply, meeting his yellow gaze with her own steady brown eyes. "Let me help him." The word please had no equivalent in Keth language. It was a concept so foreign that the translation system simply gave, a broadcasting only static, but somehow, Thok understood the meaning anyway. This creature was asking permission, not demanding, not threatening, not attempting to establish dominance, simply asking. Slowly, his massive frame stepped aside. The command deck was a charnel house. Green ichor covered every surface, and in the center of it all lay Vex, his breathing shallow and labored. Multiple wounds had torn through his natural armor, and one particularly severe gash across his torso revealed internal organs that pulsed with alien rhythms. So-young immediately knelt beside him, her scanner working frantically to understand the alien physiology. "Jaemin, I need you to start establishing an IV line. Yoonji, prep the coagulant foam. We need to stop this bleeding now." Vex's eyes snapped open at the touch of alien hands on his body, and his first instinct was to kill these intruders. His claws rose toward So-young's throat, but she didn't flinch, didn't pull back, didn't even acknowledge the threat. She simply continued working, her hands gentle but efficient as she began treating his wounds. "Shh," she murmured. The sound, carrying no meaning in any language but somehow conveying comfort. "You're safe now. We're going to take care of you." The concept of being taken care of was so foreign to Vex that his neural pathways literally couldn't process it. Keth warriors lived, fought, and died alone. They knew no comfort except victory, no safety except in battle, no care except for weapons maintenance. Yet here were these strange beings risking their lives to preserve his. Meanwhile, Communications Officer Kim Dong-woo was making breakthrough after breakthrough in establishing meaningful contact. Working from the harmonies, bridge, he analyzed every sound, every gesture, every context clue from the interactions aboard the Keth ship. "Captain, I'm starting to get a handle on their language structure," he reported to Taeho. "It's disturbing, sir. Their entire vocabulary seems centered around concepts of violence, dominance, and death. I can't find words for basic social concepts like friend or peace or even family." "What about help?" Taeho asked. "That's just it, sir. The closest equivalent seems to translate as battle assistance or preparation for combat. It's as if their entire civilization was built around warfare." Aboard the Keth ship, cultural attaché Choi Min-jung was making her own disturbing observations. The ship's design, its equipment, even the personal quarters they glimpsed, everything spoke of beings who knew only conflict. There were no recreational areas, no art, no comfort items. Even their sleeping quarters were more like barracks cells than homes. "This isn't natural," she murmured to herself, studying the harsh functionality of every surface. "No species evolves like this. Someone made them this way." Back on the command deck, something unprecedented was happening. As So-young worked to save his life, Vex found himself experiencing sensations that had no place in a Keth warrior's existence. The gentle touch of her hands as she cleaned his wounds. The soft sound of her voice, speaking in reassuring tones. The complete absence of aggression or dominance in her behavior. For the first time in his 8 decades of existence, Vex felt something approximating safety. The realization was so shocking that his entire body went rigid. Safety was impossible. The universe was combat, eternal and unending. There were only predators and prey, hunters and hunted, winners and the dead. Yet here he lay, wounded and helpless, in the hands of creatures who should be his enemies, and they were healing him. Why? The word emerged from his throat as a harsh rasp, processed through the translation system into something So-young could understand. She looked up from her work, meeting his alien gaze with human compassion. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "Because every life has value. Because it's the right thing to do." Each translated word hit Vex's consciousness like a physical blow. Value in contexts other than combat effectiveness. Right as a moral concept rather than a tactical advantage. These ideas were so foreign to his programming that they created cascade failures in neural pathways that had never been designed to process them. Engineer Yoon Kyung-ho arrived with additional repair equipment and found himself working alongside Thok to restore the ship's failing life support systems. The massive Keth warrior watched in fascination as the small human crawled into dangerous access tunnels without hesitation, risking his life to repair systems on a ship that had been trying to kill him. "You fix?" Thok asked hesitantly, the concept barely translatable. "Yes," Kyung-ho replied, his voice muffled from inside the access panel. "Your environmental systems are failing. If we don't fix them, everyone on this ship will die." The idea that an enemy would risk death to prevent other enemies from dying was so conceptually impossible that Thok experienced what could only be described as a system crash. He sat down heavily, his programming unable to reconcile what he was witnessing with everything he had been taught about the nature of existence. Hours passed as the humans worked tirelessly to save both Vex's life and his ship's failing systems. Gradually, the Keth warrior's breathing stabilized and the ship's atmosphere cleared of toxic fumes. But the real healing was happening on a much deeper level. As Vex drifted in and out of consciousness, he found himself remembering things that shouldn't exist in his memory banks. Flashes of sensations from before his conditioning was complete. Moments of something that might have been peace. The memories were fragmentary, confusing, but they suggested that Keth had not always been creatures of pure violence. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a confusion that should have been impossible for his species. "What are you?" The silence of deep space stretched endlessly around the UES harmony, broken only by the soft hum of life support systems and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Captain Lee Tae-ho stood on the bridge, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he gazed through the viewport at the star-scattered darkness of the Andromeda Spiral's outer rim. 3 years into their diplomatic survey mission, and they had yet to encounter anything more threatening than cosmic radiation. "Captain," Communications Officer Kim Dong-woo called from his station, his voice cutting through the bridge's tranquil atmosphere. "I'm picking up something unusual. Multiple energy signatures bearing 27 Mark V. Tae-ho turned, his dark eyes focusing immediately. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." Dong-woo's fingers danced across his console, his brow furrowing with concentration. "High-energy weapons discharge, Captain. Multiple sources. It's a battle." The bridge fell silent except for the persistent chirping of alerts. Xenobiologist Dr. Park So-young looked up from her research station, her gentle features creased with concern. "How far?" "Approximately 4 light minutes, sir," Dong-woo replied. "The signals are degrading rapidly. Whatever's happening out there, it's massive." Cultural attaché Choi Min-jung set down her datapad, her intuitive mind already processing implications. "Captain, if there's active combat in an uncharted system, we should maintain safe distance and observe," finished Navigator Yoon Kyung-ho from his position. "Standard protocol for unknown hostile contact." Tae-ho nodded slowly, but something nagged at him. In his 23 years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming that someone out there needed help. "Dongwoo, can you isolate individual signals? Determine how many vessels are involved?" The young officer's hands flew over his controls. "Working on it, sir. I'm reading." "Wait." His face paled. "Captain, one of the energy signatures just went dark. Complete power failure." "Destroyed?" So-young asked quietly. "Unknown. Could be critical damage, could be..." Dongwoo's voice trailed off as another reading appeared on his screen. "Sir, I'm detecting a distress beacon. Very faint, but it's there." The bridge crew exchanged glances. First contact protocols were clear. Maintain distance, observe, report back to Colonial Command. Do not engage unknown species without explicit authorization. Do not interfere in alien conflicts. Above all, do not risk human lives for strangers. Tae-ho stared at the tactical display showing the distant battle zone. Somewhere out there, someone was dying. Someone was calling for help across the vast emptiness of space, hoping against hope that anyone would hear and care enough to respond. "Helm, set course for the distress signal," he commanded. "Sir?" Kyung-ho's voice carried a note of surprise. "Captain, regulations clearly state—" "I know what they state, Navigator." Taeho's voice carried the weight of command, but also something deeper. "But someone out there needs help. We're going." The Harmony turned gracefully through space, her diplomatic hull gleaming under the light of distant stars. As they approached the battle zone, the scope of destruction became apparent on their screens. Debris fields sparkled like deadly confetti, the remains of what had once been sophisticated spacecraft scattered across thousands of cubic kilometers. "Dear God," whispered Min-jung, staring at the tactical display. At the center of the devastation, two vessels remained. One was clearly destroyed, its hull cracked open like an egg, atmosphere and fluids streaming into the void. The other sat motionless, its angular black hull scarred by weapon impacts but still intact. The surviving ship, So Young observed, studying her readings. "It's massive, at least 3 times our size. And heavily armed," added Kyung-ho grimly. "I'm reading weapon systems across its entire hull. This thing was built for war." As if summoned by his words, the alien vessel suddenly blazed to life. Weapon ports that had seemed dark and lifeless moments before began glowing with malevolent energy. The Harmony's threat assessment systems screamed warnings as targeting beams swept across their hull. "Evasive maneuvers," Taeho barked, but even as Kyung-ho's hands flew to the controls, he knew it was too late. The alien ship was too close, too fast, too ready for violence. Inside the Keith warship Bloodrender, Vex pressed his clawed hands against the command console, his reptilian features twisted in pain and rage. Green ichor seeped from wounds across his armored hide, the legacy of the battle that had just claimed his prey ship. Beside him, his battle brother Thok worked frantically at the weapons console, his massive frame hunched over the controls. "New. Contact bears weapons," Thok growled in the harsh syllables of the Keth tongue. "Small vessel. Weak armor." Vex's yellow eyes focused on the approaching ship through the pain that clouded his vision. Another scavenger, come to feast on the aftermath of battle. Another enemy to destroy before he could join his fallen brothers in the eternal war beyond. "Death. Destroy them," he commanded, his voice a predator's rasp. But as Thok's claws moved toward the firing controls, something unprecedented happened. The alien vessel made no attempt to flee or fight back. Instead, it simply stopped. And then, impossibly, a voice came through the communication system. The words were alien, meaningless to Keith ears trained only for battle speech and the cries of the dying. But Dongwu's translation software was already working, processing linguistic patterns at computer speed while the young officer broadcast on every frequency he could access. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Lee Taeho of the Human Ship Harmony. We detected your distress signal. We're here to help. Do you need medical assistance or repairs?" The message repeated in 17 different linguistic matrices as the software attempted to find common ground with the alien tongue. Aboard the Bloodrender, Vex and Thok stared at their communication system in complete bewilderment. The concept being transmitted was so foreign to their understanding that their minds struggled to process it. Help? Medical assistance? These words existed in their database, learned from intercepted communications of prey species. But they had no emotional context for them. They offer aid? Thok's voice carried a confusion that should have been impossible for a Keth warrior. Vex snarled, forcing his wounded mind back to familiar patterns. "Deception. They seek to lower our guard before the killing strike." But even as he spoke, his targeting systems registered something that made no sense. The alien vessel had not raised shields. Its weapons remained powered down. It simply sat there in space, a perfect target, broadcasting offers of help to the very creature that had been about to destroy it. "Fire," Vex commanded, his voice weaker, now as blood loss took its toll. Thok's claw moved to the weapon control but hesitated. Something about this situation violated every combat algorithm in his brain. Prey did not approach predators. Enemies did not offer assistance. Yet here was this small, fragile ship doing exactly that. The firing control flashed red, then died. Critical damage from the previous battle had finally claimed the Bloodrender's primary weapons array. Systems failing, Thok reported, his voice oddly flat. Weapons offline. Life support at 30%. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. Vex tried to stand, tried to reach the backup weapons, but his legs gave out. He crashed to the deck, more green ichor pooling beneath him. His vision blurred, and for the first time in his warrior's life, he felt something approaching fear. Not fear of death. That was impossible for a Keth, but fear of something else. Something undefined and terrifying. Failure. Helplessness. The need for something he had no name for. Aboard the Harmony, So Young was already preparing her medical kit. Captain, if there are survivors on that ship, they won't last long. I'm reading massive system failures, atmosphere leaking. They were trying to kill us 30 seconds ago, Kyung-ho pointed out, but his voice lacked conviction. Tae-ho looked at each of his crew members, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. They were explorers, diplomats, healers. It didn't matter what species lay dying in that crippled ship. It didn't matter that moments ago it had been their enemy. Someone needed help, and they had the ability to provide it. Dongwu, transmit docking protocols. So Young, prep the medical bay for unknown alien physiology. Minjung, I need you to start working on communication algorithms. If we're going aboard that ship, we need to be able to talk to whoever's inside. Sir, Kyung-ho said quietly, this violates every first contact protocol in the book. Tae-ho smiled grimly as he watched the alien vessel growing larger in their viewport. Then I guess we're about to write a new book, Navigator. Take us in. The Harmony moved forward through the debris field, its docking bay extending toward the wounded alien ship like an offered hand. In the depths of space, surrounded by the remnants of violence and death, two species approached each other with no idea that they were about to change the course of galactic history forever. Behind them, the stars watched in silence, eternal witnesses to what might have been the universe's most improbable first contact.